Have you ever feared that you could stand before the holy, yet walk away unchanged? This is the wound St. Thomas warns about. A wound hidden, silent, slow. The kind that grows when the body attends the Mass, but the heart does not arrive. My dear brothers and sisters, many souls carry this quiet emptiness. They show up, they sit, they speak the responses, but something within remains untouched, as if grace is falling, yet not finding a place to rest. St. Thomas teaches that the sacred mystery is always offered in fullness, yet its power enters only as deeply as the heart is open. If the heart is distracted, unprepared, or numb, the Spirit receives only a shadow of what God is trying to give. This is why today matters. Because if the Mass is the sacrifice that saves the world, then how we stand before it shapes the very way our soul learns to breathe. If you have ever wondered why your prayer feels thin, why your peace fades quickly, why worship leaves you unchanged, stay with me. Remain to the end. You will hear what St. Thomas Aquinas believed about the hidden cost of approaching the holy without the heart awake. And before we go deeper, share one prayer so your heart speaks first. Comment with the words, "Lord, awaken my heart today." Hold that prayer. Let it anchor you. For what we uncover will guide you into the kind of worship that does not merely attend the Mass, but receives it. Have you ever noticed that your lips spoke the creed while your spirit felt absent? This is the ache St. Thomas understands deeply. He teaches that worship is not only presence, but intention, not only posture, but surrender. If the heart is unfocused, the grace offered cannot anchor itself. Many Catholics walk into the church already exhausted, carrying noise, carrying wounds, carrying the worries that hollow the soul from within. And the moment the Mass begins, they realize their interior world has not crossed the threshold with them. This disconnect is not a small thing. It shapes the way grace lands or fails to land. It shapes the way truth penetrates or passes by like wind. St. Thomas calls this the poverty of divided attention. A poverty that dims devotion, weakens desire, and leaves the believer wondering why the holy feels distant. But here is the hidden tragedy. When the soul is half awake at Mass, the distance you feel is not God withholding himself. It is the heart unable to receive what is being poured out. And this is why we continue. Because if the soul can awaken even a little more, even today, it can begin to receive what has always been offered with infinite generosity. Stay with me. For the mystery ahead reveals why the sacred presence can be fully real, yet barely touched. And this insight from St. Thomas will prepare your heart for the deeper truth we are about to enter. Have you ever feared that holy moments could pass through your life without leaving a trace? St. Thomas addresses this fear with striking clarity. He reminds us that divine gifts do not force themselves into the soul. They wait for readiness. They seek openness. They enter only when welcomed. This means a person can stand at the altar and still miss what heaven is pouring out. Not because God is distant, but because the heart is unsteady and the will is unfocused. Many believers carry this secret burden. They long for strength, they long for renewal, yet they walk away from Mass still thirsty, still restless, still carrying the same inner weight. St. Thomas describes this as a failure of inner disposition, a spiritual posture that must be aligned before grace can deepen its work. Without this alignment, sacred encounters remain only surface deep. This is not condemnation, it is compassion. Aquinas wants us to understand why certain prayers feel unanswered, why some liturgies seem to touch others more than they touch us. He is showing us that grace is abundant, but reception is fragile. And when the interior world is scattered or cold, the soul absorbs little of the power being offered. This is why we must pause here, because understanding this truth opens the door for a profound shift, a shift that can restore sensitivity, quiet the heart, and prepare the soul for a richer communion. Remain with me, for what unfolds next reveals how St. Thomas guides believers to enter the Mass with a new interior strength, so grace no longer slips past, but finally takes root. Have you ever wondered why spiritual desire rises yet fades before the Mass ends? St. Thomas offers an answer that cuts gently but deeply. He teaches that the soul must be shaped before grace can anchor itself. Not shaped by emotion, but by intention. Not shaped by routine, but by longing. This preparation is not about perfect focus. It is about turning inward with honesty and humility. It is about admitting the cold corners of the heart that long to stay hidden. Many believers enter the liturgy carrying hurried thoughts, unresolved tension, or quiet disappointments. They hope the sacred moment will lift everything instantly. But St. Thomas explains that the altar strengthens what the soul willingly reveals, not what it refuses to open. This is why preparation matters. Because a guarded heart receives only fragments, while a softened heart receives abundance. He calls this the interior movement toward the one who gives. A movement that begins before the first prayer, before the first hymn, in the silent decision to let God enter freely. This truth carries weight. It invites us to pause with intention, to breathe with awareness, to let the Lord gently arrange the Spirit so the holy encounter can penetrate deeply. And holding this awareness changes everything. For once the soul learns how to turn toward God with honest desire, the entire rhythm of the Mass takes on new clarity. Remain with me, for the path ahead reveals how this preparation unlocks a deeper participation, one that allows the sacred action to reach places in us that have been untouched for years. Have you ever feared that your spirit might be drifting one quiet Sunday at a time? St. Thomas speaks to this fear with sobering tenderness. He explains that neglect in worship does not wound all at once. It wears the soul down in small, unseen ways. It weakens attention, dims conscience, and slowly dulls the inner life. Many believers do not notice when this erosion begins. There is no loud warning, no obvious collapse, only a gradual fading of reverence and sensitivity. A thinning of devotion that feels subtle, but becomes devastating over months or years. This is the danger of approaching the holy with scattered focus or weary indifference. Not because God withdraws, but because the soul loses its capacity to receive his gifts fully. St. Thomas describes this as the cooling of the interior fire, a cooling that can happen even in those who never miss a single Mass. Their bodies are present, but their spirit grows increasingly distant. And when this chill settles into the heart, prayer becomes effort, gratitude weakens, and sacred moments feel strangely hollow. This is the pain so many Catholics carry but rarely name. They wonder why grace feels faint, why worship feels muted, why the altar feels far away, even when standing before it. But take courage. Because St. Thomas does not leave us in this valley, he offers a profound insight, a way for the inner fire to be stirred again, so faith can rise with strength and the holy becomes vivid once more. Hold this truth as we continue, for what unfolds ahead will illuminate how God rekindles the soul when it feels nearly silent inside. Have you ever paused and wondered if you truly recognize who stands before you at the altar? St. Thomas calls this recognition the turning point of the entire spiritual life. He teaches that the Holy Mass is not a memory, nor a symbol, nor a distant echo of a sacred event. It is the living Christ entering this very moment with the fullness of his mystery. This is the truth that shakes the heart awake, because if the incarnate Lord is present in reality, not imagination, then every distracted glance becomes a missed encounter with the one who gives life. Many Catholics do not realize how immense this encounter is. They hear familiar prayers, they follow steady rhythms, yet they stand inches away from the same Jesus who once walked among fishermen and healed the broken with a single word. St. Thomas describes this presence with breathtaking conviction. He says, "The Eucharistic Christ is the same Christ born in Bethlehem, crucified on Calvary, and risen in glory. Nothing less, nothing reduced, nothing diminished." And here lies the piercing truth. If this presence does not move us, it is not because he is subtle. It is because our perception has grown dull. This moment at the altar is the very place where heaven touches earth, where God bends low to feed his people with himself. If the Mass feels ordinary, it is only because our interior sight has not yet awakened to the weight of what unfolds before us. Yet this awakening is possible. It begins quietly, with a single act of sincere awareness, a willingness to behold Christ as he truly is, radiant, living, present. Remain with me now, for the path ahead will reveal how a believer can approach this presence in a way that restores clarity and deepens devotion, so the soul receives with renewed strength. Have you ever felt that something glorious was being offered to you at Mass, yet your spirit remained untouched? St. Thomas understands this ache with remarkable clarity. He teaches that the soul receives most when it approaches the Lord with deliberate intention, not forced, not strained, but freely chosen with quiet sincerity. This intentional openness is not complicated. It begins with a simple act of turning inward and giving God permission to work deeply. Many believers do not realize that a small movement of the heart can change everything. One moment of reverence, one silent offering, one honest desire, and the inner world begins to shift. St. Thomas explains that grace flows strongly when the will leans gently toward God. Not perfectly, but genuinely. This leaning creates a sacred space where the holy can take root. If you have felt distant or numb or weary in worship, do not be discouraged, for the Lord responds powerfully to even the smallest gesture of surrender. A brief pause before the liturgy begins, a whispered prayer for purity of heart, a quiet choice to lift the mind toward heaven. These simple actions prepare the soul for something profound, and when the heart enters the Mass with this posture, the sacred encounter deepens, clarity increases, and the presence of Christ becomes more vivid and more transforming. Hold this truth gently, for what we explore now will show how this posture not only opens the soul, but protects it from drifting again, so your worship carries strength long after the liturgy ends. Have you ever walked out of Mass and felt unchanged, as if nothing touched the deepest part of you? St. Thomas speaks to this sorrow with quiet gravity. He teaches that the Lord always offers abundance, yet many walk away without carrying anything home. Not because the gift is small, but because the heart did not reach to receive it. This is one of the great pains within the life of faith. Moments filled with grace can pass by unnoticed. Blessings meant for healing remain untouched, and the soul departs with the same heaviness it brought through the door. St. Thomas calls this a missed fruit of worship, a loss that grieves heaven, not out of anger, but out of longing for our good. Many believers do not intend this emptiness. They arrive burdened. They try to pray. They hope something will lift. But the inward stretching never fully happens, and so the gift remains at the surface. Here is the tender warning. The Mass is not passive. It invites response. It invites trust. It invites the soul to step forward, even in weakness, and welcome what God pours out. If you leave the liturgy without a spark of renewal, do not assume there is nothing offered. Often the grace is near, waiting for a simple gesture of willingness. Hold this in your heart, for entering the gift and carrying it home is part of the worship itself. Stay with me, for what unfolds now will reveal how the soul can hold on to grace long after the final blessing, so nothing holy is left behind again. There comes a moment when the heart must decide what it will take with it as it leaves the sanctuary. St. Thomas reminds us that worship does not end when the final words are spoken. Its strength continues through the choices we make after we step outside. This is where grace takes its deepest form. In the quiet hours, in the hidden struggles, in the ordinary places where the Lord waits to be welcomed again. If the Holy Mass has stirred something in you today, hold it close. Let it guide your steps. Let it soften your judgments. Let it shape tomorrow with quiet fidelity. Carry one thought with you. Every sincere offering creates room for God to work more deeply. Nothing given in love is ever wasted. And if your spirit still feels uncertain or fragile or slow to rise, do not be afraid. The Lord is patient with every soul that turns toward Him, with even the smallest hope. As we end this time together, share one prayer for the week ahead, a simple line that opens the heart. Write these words so your soul speaks first. Lord, stay close to me always. Thank you for listening with such reverence. If this reflection has touched your journey, consider subscribing, liking, and sharing, so more hearts can rediscover the beauty of worship that transforms. Until we meet again, may the peace of Christ steady your spirit and lead you gently into a deeper communion that endures beyond every Mass.